The people I talk about on this channel usually have some degree of remorse for their actions, or at the very least come up with genuine apologies once their transgressions have been exposed. People like Blue Skies, Revie, and Bombastic Hype have all posted apologies or at least explanations for what they did, and that was that for each of their controversies. However, there are always people in the world who will never own up to their actions, who will keep lying and manipulating, and will keep digging themselves into deeper and deeper holes until they can't escape their past mistakes. But even when cornered, they still don't give in, like the subject of today's video. If you don't know, Rightburst is a modder who worked mostly on Sonic.exe FNF mods. He is probably most well known for his contributions to the original Verse Sonic.exe mod, of which he was the director for some time. Due to a combination of his lack of developmental contributions, tendency to badmouth his own team, and lying behaviour, Rightburst was voted out of the mod team, with the director role being filled in by another modder, Revie. Revie, as you probably know, was then exposed in January of 2022, with Rightburst also speaking out against Revie for alleged manipulative behaviour. Said behaviour, however, was eventually disproven. In mid-2023, Rightburst created another Sonic.exe related mod called FNF Parallax with his friend Chrome. However, this mod was ultimately scrapped, with some content being transferred to another one of Rightburst's directed projects, Daredevil Funkin, and some content being transferred to a new mod he was working on, Sonic.exe Rerun, of which he was just a team member. Rightburst's key contribution to this Sonic.exe Rerun mod was his Sonic NES OC. However, he was later removed from this mod team, as well as having his character removed due to similar reasons as when he had been kicked out from the original Sonic.exe mod team: lack of progress in his work and bad-mouthing the team behind their backs. But recently, Rightburst has been exposed for a lot more controversial activity, from drug use to constant lying and manipulation to bad-mouthing Revie even a year after the resolution of her controversy. So let's dive into these accusations and see if they put the final nail in the coffin for one of Friday Night Funkin's most controversial modders. At the very end of July 2022, a Twitter account called Rightburner posted a Google document about Rightburst, with the intent being to expose a lot of his lesser-known controversial actions. This post garnered a fair bit of attention, especially from Rightburst himself. So let's talk about it, shall we? The doc begins with an introduction which states that the purpose of the document is to expose Rightburst's controversial behaviour. The doc also advocates for Rightburst not having a platform anymore to influence others. The second segment of the document outlines Rightburst's use of the N slur in Discord servers, which he had claimed he was blackmailed into saying. However, there is no proof of any blackmail occurring. The third segment is about Rightburst's manipulative and creepy behaviour. For example, he has frequently claimed to have dementia as a way to explain why he can't remember having certain conversations with people, as a way to avoid confrontation when someone claims he has said something controversial. However, Rightburst does not exhibit most of the symptoms of childhood dementia, such as loss of basic sensory functions and developmental disorders, as well as most childhood dementia victims usually dying before the age of 18. As I said before, Rightburst would also ditch his friends and talk behind their back, which led to him getting kicked out of the Sonic.exe Rerun mod in mid-July of 2023. He's also shown to be passive-aggressive about his own projects, such as claiming he's the only person who puts effort into mods he works on. The doc writer also highlights Rightburst's general lack of sincerity whenever he apologizes for his various mistakes. He even acknowledges the fact that people don't like him and how he should embrace being a bad person. An example of his insincerity can be seen in how he handles a situation that he himself caused in May of 2023, when he tweeted something incredibly creepy about walking upstairs behind girls. After receiving extremely fierce backlash, Rightburst went on to claim that this was a joke that one of his friends made, and that he had just decided to post it on Twitter, not realizing how weird it was. A couple days later, he posted a full-on apology, urging people to hold him accountable for his mistakes, as well as saying he would do his best to be better. This is hilariously contradicted because a few days later, screenshots were leaked of Rightburst and his friends on Discord talking about how the joke would have been acceptable if anyone else had said it. But since Rightburst is a controversial person, then people just use this as an opportunity to hop on the hate train against him. This clearly shows his apology was not genuine in the slightest, and was only really a ploy to appease his haters. Furthermore, Rightburst notably has a habit of interacting with NSFW accounts on his Twitter account. This doesn't sound that bad, until you realize that if you are following someone, the tweets that they interact with will be sent to your Twitter feed, meaning that Rightburst was exposing all of his 20,000 followers, most of whom are presumably minors, to a lot of NSFW content. The fourth segment of the doc is about Rightburst's apparent possession and possibly addiction. Screenshots are provided where Rightburst admits to taking drugs like as well as implying he has a group of friends who supply him with illicit substances, which he obviously keeps secret from his parents. He also does and subsequently breaks down in people's DMs during his drug intake. The fifth segment of the doc is about the Revie situation and how despite apparently apologizing and making amends with her, he still isn't being 100% genuine. In January of 2023, Rightburst posted a document where he apologized for over-exaggerating his mental health conditions and his contributions to harassment against Revie. He admits to self-diagnosing himself with dementia and says that he was very immature for doing so. He also explains how he was quite controlling of the original Sonic.exe mod, pointing out that it was very upsetting for Revie to recognize Rightburst's authoritarian behavior and get him promptly removed from the team back in 2021. He also says that he wasn't the first person to plan Revie's takedown, and that it was Kubikorg, False Cow, Avery, and others who convinced him to join in for the sake of revenge. Rightburst details how his participation in the harassment against Revie was a massive mistake, as he eventually felt bad about what he did to Revie, but people would still continue lumping him together with the people who genuinely hated her. So he continued to harass Revie, as he thought there was no other choice. This is a surprisingly in-depth apology, which makes it all the more disgusting when it was revealed that Rightburst hadn't even written the apology himself. He just enlisted one of his critics, Egg on YouTube, to write it for him. As Rightburner says, this shows that Rightburst wasn't even willing to apologize for his own mistakes, opting instead for telling someone else to write his apology for him. The first of just many examples of his insincerity about the situation he was facing, which is awful on his part since, even if the initial outing was not by him, he was one of, if not the primary instigator of the infamous witch hunt against Revie and those who support her. And even after this, Rightburst would continue hitting at Revie in various ways, like stealing her artwork despite her expressly calling him out for doing so, as well as randomly bringing her up in conversations as a baseline for people he hates, and still continues to push the narrative that Revie is a terrible person even after he himself stated that most of the controversy was misinformation that he knowingly spread. The document concludes with a string of Discord DMs between Rightburst and an anonymous user, apparently occurring on the day that this doc was posted. Rightburst was given a final chance to own up to his mistakes of pointlessly slandering Revie for almost 2 years straight, but he continues to avoid the confrontation and even tries to argue an absurd bit of logic by saying that this controversy isn't about what he did, but what everyone made him become. He claims that everyone supporting Revie has sent him into a self-destructive cycle, and he clearly tries to get sympathy from the person he is talking to. However, it's kind of hard to feel bad for someone who's dug themselves into a hole and is digging themselves even deeper by trying to cover up their past mistakes. Rightburst inexplicably states that he has no other option in this situation than to continue hating on Revie, to which the other person says that all he has to do is to genuinely hold himself accountable and take responsibility for what he did. But Rightburst continues to ignore basic logic and claims that this means beating himself up even more. At the very end of the document, the writer gives a final stern message to Rightburst, saying that Rightburst has made bad decisions time and time again, leaving everyone around him no choice but to create this document as a wake-up call for him, and to expose his true nature as a two-faced, spiteful and petty absolute maniac. Very shortly after this document was released, Rightburst hosted a Twitter Space livestream where he claimed to explain stuff. However, he barely scratches the surface of the Google Doc and his responses to the points against him were vague at best and non-existent at worst.
Now for the Revie. The Revie thing, right? I got kicked out of Rerun, and I was like, oh, what's going on? So a bunch of friends were asking for me. They were like, oh, Revie did this, Revie did that. I'm like, what? I thought we had this settled. So I was getting a little bit pissed, and I was not having it. I did not like that they were doing that. I thought they were talking smack about me, and I didn't like that. I thought we were over this whole entire drama, and I wasn't having it. So that's more or less why I said the things I said, albeit it was all harsh and out of anger. Still not right of me to say at all. I recently found out that Revie did nothing wrong about the whole entire thing, and there's nothing really much I could say other than I apologize for that.
The stream was about 14 minutes long, but he only begins speaking about the relevant topic about 2 minutes in, and then the only points he ends up addressing are the ones about him saying slurs, his take, and his slander of Revie after everything had come out. Much of the end of the stream consisted of him saying that he was going to try to be a better person, but God knows how many times he said that. Needless to say, Rightburst's response was severely lacking, but this still wasn't the end of the situation. A week later, another Google Doc exposing Rightburst was posted on the Rightburner Twitter account. Now this doc is twice the length as the previous one, so I'll have to be a bit more brief. I do highly recommend you all check the docs for yourself if you want the full story. I've linked both of them in the description below. Essentially, before the first doc calling him out was released, Rightburst joined a group of controversial friends, and allegedly planned to make their own Google Doc exposing Revie, a modder named Joe, and all the modders who worked on Rightburst's latest project from which he was kicked, Sonic.exe Rerun, as well as his own friend Nayu Chrome. The problem was, all of the accusations against their targets were extremely outlandish and didn't make any sense when you inspected them with any scrutiny. They claimed that Revie and Joe were caught on video having a champagne party to celebrate Rightburst being cancelled after the first call-out doc went live, as well as using the writer's anonymous status to claim that Revie and Joe were actually the writers of that Google Doc. Rightburst and his posse also tried to spin a narrative that Nayu, Rightburst's friend, had blackmailed Rightburst into saying the N-word to expose him later, as well as wanting to use out-of-context DMs of Nayu sending Rule 34 art to a minor as evidence that he was a creep, despite Nayu being a minor at the time, as well as potentially being a victim to which the DMs were being sent. Rightburst also has the audacity to call Revie petty, when Rightburst was the one who got kicked out of a mod team for being an idiot, and got so mad that he helped launch a massive misinformation hate campaign against Revie, continued to slander Revie for the next 1.5 years, half-heartedly apologized more than once, but continued to slander Revie, and is now trying to force her back into his stupid little expose document. Rightburst may also be planning on revealing Revie's current Discord tag in an attempt to direct hate against her, which is some of the most petty stuff I have ever heard. Imagine being so pathetic that you're still trying to send your fans to harass someone a year after the controversy had been resolved. The doc also goes into some case studies of people Rightburst has manipulated or tried to manipulate. The first example is someone named Harthy Jar, who was a devoted friend of Rightburst and apparently was completely closed-minded to any reasoning, saying that they don't care about losing their reputation by associating with Rightburst. Being so stubborn in supporting Rightburst is incredibly strange, to say the very least. On the complete other end of the spectrum is an anonymous user, whose name is censored in yellow, who, unlike Harthy Jar, easily recognized Rightburst's manipulative behavior. This person claims that Rightburst kept feeding them lies about Nayu and the rerun team, like blackmail and stealing ideas. For a time, Rightburst was not very close to this anonymous person. However, after the first call-out doc was posted, all of a sudden Rightburst was acting like best friends with them, inviting them to all his servers and projects. This anonymous person was also allegedly convinced to defend Rightburst for the good of the community, to stop Revie and Joe from becoming figureheads in the Sonic.exe community. In his server of friends, Rightburst would also put out these faux inspirational Discord speeches, warning people about the exposés being made about him and how they shouldn't flip the gun immediately, but instead stick together as a family. He also tries to reassure everyone that he is changing, and those who are willing to see that change will not be disappointed. Yeah, excuse me for not believing it this time. But the true motivations of these announcements becomes clear when you see these messages he sent several hours later, requesting that if anyone leaves the server, other members of the server have to try and convince the leavers to join back, or at least remain on good terms with Rightburst. It's obvious that Rightburst is desperately trying to keep people on his side despite fighting a losing battle on every front, and this announcement here was made the day before the first doc was released. He says he wants to voice call with the other server members to set things in place in preparation for the doc, which doesn't make any sense since he probably wouldn't have been able to anticipate most of the things in the doc, so this was probably just a means to gaslight people into believing in him before the doc got posted. After this first doc got posted, Rightburst was genuinely scared of getting caught in real legal trouble for his use, which, if you remember, had been exposed in detail. He spoke to a lot of people asking for advice on how to handle this problem, which was essentially to either tell his parents or receive treatment and therapy. However, he claimed to be too scared to talk to a therapist about his issues, instead opting to discuss with his parents and family. However, it seems that he never ended up talking to his parents about this. His colleagues were genuinely concerned for his health and were seriously encouraging him to seek professional help, or at the very least communicate his concerns to his family. However, instead of taking one of the two very simple paths, Rightburst, the expert excavator, got his shovel and started digging another damn hole for himself, opening up the worst possible third path he could ever have thought of. Instead, Rightburst claims that he had never actually taken drugs, and that he had been lying about his use the whole time for attention. None of his friends believed him. In what universe is this the correct thing to do? I genuinely can't fathom the thought process here. Look, I can empathize with having trouble speaking to people about your issues, but when there is so much proof of your usage, from literally admitting to it, to your fear of getting caught, to your history of pathological lying, this ain't it, Chief. This document also ends with a stern message to Rightburst, stating that he has constantly relied on lying and manipulation to avoid owning up to his mistakes, refusing to ever take any genuine accountability for his actions, and his consistent harassment of others that makes him sound hypocritical when he complains about the harassment he himself receives. The doc also addresses Rightburst's friends, warning them that their continued association with him will lead to their own downfalls. Since this second document about him, Rightburst has not been active at all on any of his public social media profiles. One can only hope that he is genuinely trying to better himself, and not just doing some damage control to salvage the loyalty of his few remaining fans. Obviously, a lot of stuff Rightburst did was disgusting and potentially unforgivable. However, I do think that it would be better than nothing for Rightburst to take full accountability for his actions, and not what he always does, where he posts a crappy half-hearted apology or asks someone else to write it for him. I want him to fully mean it. I know it's impossible to know exactly what someone else is thinking, but I do want to put my trust in Rightburst that he can actually develop and better himself, as he's always saying. Maybe that's just me being an optimist, but I like to think anyone can redeem themselves. Despite his misgivings, maybe Rightburst can redeem himself too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.